Okay, so excuse me. So in this video segment, I just want to talk a little bit about the spinal nerve and use that to transition into talking about sensory receptors and reflexes. Okay, so basically, when it comes to understanding a little bit about the spinal cord and how it works, you have to understand that, for starters, when you look at it from the dorsal or ventral aspects, okay, there's different types of information coming in and coming out of the spinal cord. All right. Now, even before we get into that, you'll notice that when you do a cross-sectional anatomy of a spinal nerve, anywhere along the spinal cord, you're going to notice there's an inner working of gray matter and an outer lining or layer of white matter. Okay. Now, it's very important that you understand the difference between gray and white matter as a student because this is the difference between understanding where processing centers are in the central nervous system and where nerve pathways are in the central nervous system. So gray matter is basically consolidated areas of neuron cell bodies. Okay, so this is where you find clusters of nerve cell bodies. Okay, and the reason why the area looks so gray where you find all these nerve cell bodies, because remember, you look at a nerve cell, you see the nerve, and then the body, then the axon, and the terminals at the end. Okay, it's because of this, the nucleus. Okay, when you put a bunch of nerve cell bodies together, and you have all those nuclei of those cells kind of condensed within a certain area, it's going to give that area a darker appearance, kind of a grayish colored appearance. Okay, so hence the term gray matter. All right, when we talk about white matter, what you're looking at the projections of the neuron, the axons, okay? And the reason why it looks white, not just under a microscope, but to the naked eye, is because of the presence of myelin. Okay, remember, myelin is a lipoprotein, all right? You remember looking at tissues under the microscope, fats have a very white color to them, okay? So when you have a bunch of axons projecting to different areas of the central nervous system, when you have a lot of them packed together, the tissue is going to look very white because of all the fat that's in myelin. Okay, and that's why we call it white matter. All right, so, and then in the brain, for example, that outer covering of gray matter, that's your cerebral cortex. And then when you find a deep kind of area of gray matter within the cerebral hemispheres, that's what you call basically a nucleus or a center of the brain. Okay, so keep that in mind, the difference between gray and white matter. Gray matter are the neuronal cell bodies. White matter are the projecting axons or the nerve pathways. Okay, and the reason why it's important to understand that is because that axons are how neurons send information. They extend out to our other neurons or tissues of the body to generate action potentials, release neurotransmitters for sending information. Okay, and the nerve cell bodies are where information is received. All right. So basically, now when we come over to the spinal nerve, you'll notice that, when you look at the dorsal and the ventral side, okay, I know it's a little hard to see because the video quality is not the best on these, but you'll see these blue-colored, nerve pathways entering into the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord, and the blue are representing sensory neurons. Okay. So basically, something to think about then is sensory information enters the dorsal aspect of the spinal cord. Okay, so basically what happens, therefore motor output leaves or exits the ventral aspect of the spinal cord. Okay, now there's an area where these dorsal and ventral nerves kind of come together. And this area where this happens, that's what we call a mixed nerve. Okay, sorry, that's what we call a mixed nerve. All right. Now you'll notice on the dorsal end, where the sensory input is coming into the spinal cord, you'll notice there's this kind of large bulge. Okay, and that large bulge is what's called the dorsal root ganglion. Okay, for singular, ganglia for plural. Okay. Now, what a ganglion is just a big cluster of nerve cell bodies. Okay, so what we're saying here, our neurons are projecting into the spinal cord, and they're going to hit another set of neurons that are then going to generate action potentials into the spinal cord. Whereas when you notice motor output, Okay, you've got axons, very long axons projecting from the gray matter all the way out to the target tissue. Okay, when it comes to motor output. Okay, so now when you take a look at where this sensory information is coming into the gray matter here, you'll notice that if you look at this horn over here, you'll notice that on kind of the distal aspect of that horn, you'll see that I have labeled SS. That stands for somatosensory. Okay, that means that sensory input is going to come in and it's going to synapse with interneurons, more than likely within the very outer distal aspects of that horn. Okay, and then visceral sensory, so basically sense from your connective tissue capsules and internal organs. Those sensory neurons are going to come in and synapse deeper within the dorsal horn. Okay, and remember that when we have sensory neurons coming into the spinal cord, remember they're synapsing with a type of nerve called interneurons. Okay, like I said, think of interneurons as like relays. Okay, so this basically interneurons are going to figure out, based on the type of input that's coming in. Is it pain? Is it a pain stimulus? Is it is it a pain stimulus? Is it temperature or whatever it may be? Okay, their interneurons are going to figure out, is this information going to go directly up to the brain, or is it going to synapse right back out for the purpose of a reflex? Okay, so interneurons are like the processing nerves, the relay centers of the central nervous system. That's what the bulk of neurons in the body are. They're interneurons. Okay, so you've got sensory in the dorsal aspect, and then when it comes to the ventral aspect of the spinal cord, that's where you have motor output. Okay, so if I want to plan a movement, okay, in my brain, and I want to, I don't know, heck, let's say I'm planning a gesture, I always do these goofy gestures when I'm talking or when I'm writing on the board. Okay, I plan that in my brain. Okay, it goes through a very complex process of planning that, and then that information is going to travel down the correct spinal, the pathway, and it's going to go out and it's going to hit an interneuron, and then it's going to come out, okay, via motor neuron. So then I can create the right movements so I can write on the board. All right, or if I have a sensory neuron projecting pain stimulus in, all right, then that interneuron is going to immediately synapse with, communicate with the motor neuron, and then bam, we're right back out so we can have a withdrawal reflex. That's why that's why you move before you feel pain. Okay, so again, it's going to be very important to understand this basic layout of a spinal nerve if you really want to understand a response like a withdrawal reflex. Okay, sensory in the dorsal aspect. Okay, motor out in the ventral aspect. And again, know your difference between gray and white matter.